On July the 6th, 1944, the circus rolled into Hartford, Connecticut, promising an afternoon of wonders under the giant big top. More than 7,000 people crowded into the tent, seeking a few carefree hours of wonder and escape from a world at war. But the history of the performing arts has always walked beside the shadow of catastrophe. In Hartford, delight became desperation in minutes as a small flame raced across the paraffin-sealed canvas. Laughter snapped into screams, aisles turned into bottlenecks, joy into a fight for survival. By day's end, one of the deadliest temporary structure fires in US history had taken 168 lives, most of them women and children, and left a city forever marked by a show that began with magic and ended in mourning. The Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey Circus, proudly billed as the greatest show on earth, arrived in Hartford like a moving dream. Elephants in silver harnesses trumpeted down the streets, lions and tigers growled behind their cages, and acrobats in glittering costumes stretched and rehearsed beneath the stifling July heat. Brightly coloured posters promised laughter, wonder, and the death-defying feats of the legendary Flying Walenders. In the summer of 1944, America was deep in the grip of war. Ration books filled kitchen drawers, and families counted sugar by the spoonful and gasoline by the drop. But when the circus came to town, the world seemed to pause. For a few precious hours, people could forget the headlines and remember how to smile. The Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey Circus was a marvel of its time. It crossed the country by train like a moving city, hauling hundreds of performers, animals and wagons from town to town. Under its enormous big top, more than 9,000 spectators could sit shoulder to shoulder around 3 glittering rings, a cathedral of spectacle that promised laughter and awe wherever it went. When word spread that Ringling was coming to Hartford, Connecticut, excitement swept through the city. Posters appeared overnight, bold reds and yellows shouting of acrobats, elephants and clowns. Children begged their mothers for tickets. For many, it was the first light-hearted event they'd had in years. With so many fathers and brothers away fighting overseas, the crowd that July was mostly women and children, families hungry for joy in a world that had forgotten it. But even the circus couldn't escape the war. Fuel shortages, rationing and labour disruptions meant equipment often arrived late and tired. The trains that carried the animals and tents had to wait their turn on rails crowded with military shipments. When the Ringling Brothers Circus reached Hartford, the crew was already behind schedule. The plan had been to open on the afternoon of July the 5th, but set-up ran long and the matinee had to be cancelled, an ill omen in circus lore. A lost show means bad luck, performers would whisper. Still, when the evening performance finally began, the crowd roared and the sense of dread seemed to fade, and the first night went off without a hitch. The following day, July the 6th, dawned bright and hot, another chance to chase away the darkness of war. No one could have imagined that by mid-afternoon the joy beneath that great canvas tent would turn to panic, and the laughter of children would be replaced by screams that still echo through Hartford's history. By early afternoon, the fairgrounds on Barber Street were alive with anticipation. Mothers bought lemonade and popcorn for their children, soldiers on leave bought sweethearts to the matinee, and grandparents took up places on the bleachers, fanning themselves with programs. More than 7,000 people crowded under the giant striped tent, a structure so large it could hold an entire city block beneath its roof. Few knew that the very fabric above their heads was a deadly hazard. To keep out the rain, the big top had been waterproof with a mixture of paraffin wax and gasoline. 6,000 gallons of the mixture brushed across the canvas until it gleamed. It was common practice at the time, accepted as safe, but the result was a giant wick, one spark away from disaster. The afternoon show began at 2:23 p.m. The band struck up its march, the lions roared from their cages, and the crowd erupted in cheers. In the centre ring, animal trainer May Kovar directed her leopards, while on the far side a young clown named Emmett Kelly prepared to enter the ring. Kelly, known to millions as Weary Willie, would soon become one of the most haunting faces of the day. Outside, the temperature hovered near 90 degrees. Inside, beneath the canvas roof, it was hotter still. Humid, airless, the smell of hay and sweat and excitement heavy in the air. And then somewhere near the southwest corner of the tent, a small orange glow appeared. No one knows exactly how it began. Perhaps a cigarette, perhaps a spark from a light. Within seconds, the flame climbed the sidewall and licked across the roof. One usher ran for a bucket of water, another for an extinguisher, but the extinguishers, still in their crates from the day before, had never been unpacked. The audience gasped as the fire began to spread. At first, some thought it was part of the act, and then the band leader, Merle Evans, recognised the danger and gave the signal known only to circus workers. The Stars and Stripes Forever. It was the code for catastrophe. From that moment, everything descended into chaos. The fire raced along the roof faster than anyone could move. The paraffin-soaked canvas ignited like gasoline, and within seconds the tent became a furnace. The light inside turned orange and then white hot. Screams filled the air. Parents grabbed children and ran for the exits. But many exits were blocked. To protect the audience from the lions and tigers, the circus had built steel chutes that connected the performance ring to the animals' wagons. Now they formed deadly barriers between life and death. The crowd surged towards the main entrance. Bleachers collapsed under the stampede. People stumbled, fell, and were trampled. Psychologists would later describe the panic as the zombie effect, when the human mind shuts down under extreme fear and people follow the movement of the crowd without thought or reason. Some froze in place, staring at the flames. Others ran blindly into them. In the midst of the chaos, acts of courage stood out like stars in the smoke. At the northwest side of the tent, 13-year-old Donald Anderson remembered the small fishing knife he'd tucked into his pocket that morning. Trapped against the sidewall with dozens of others, he began to cut. The blade tore through the heavy canvas, and as he pulled the slit open, fresh air rushed in, and people surged through the hole. He moved down the wall, cutting again and again, until his hands blistered. Hundreds escaped through the gaps he made. Near the animal chutes, circus workers were fighting to save the children. Bill Curley, a broad-shouldered roustabout, climbed the steel runway that had become impassable. One by one, he lifted children up and over, handing them to others on the far side. He saved dozens before the collapsing poles brought the roof down on him. Inside the inferno, Emmett Kelly the clown ran back and forth with buckets of water, his painted grin streaked with soot and sweat. He would later be photographed, a weary clown holding a bucket beside a burning ruin, an image that would come to symbolise the tragedy. Within 8 minutes the tent was gone. The fire burned so fiercely that it created its own wind, pulling the canvas inwards as it collapsed. Survivors described it as a roar, a single monstrous sound, and then silence. When firefighters arrived, there was nothing left to save. The ground was blackened, wooden bleachers were reduced to ash, and bodies lay scattered amid the wreckage. Some huddled in groups, others curled where they'd fallen. The smell of paraffin and smoke hung heavy over Hartford that night. Rescuers worked through the evening, carrying the injured to Hartford Hospital. Doctors, nurses and volunteers filled every available space. Hundreds of survivors were treated for burns and smoke inhalation. At the State Armory, the dead were laid out in rows. Men, women and children, many too badly burned to recognise. Among them was a small girl, her face almost untouched, her hair singed but her features serene. She was given a number on her morgue tag, 1565. No one came to claim her. Her photograph appeared in newspapers across the country. For decades she was known only as Little Miss 1565. Her true name? 8-year-old Eleanor Cook, and that would not be discovered until nearly 50 years later. The investigation began immediately. Officials discovered that the big top had been coated with more than 1,000 pounds of paraffin wax dissolved in gasoline. A single match could ignite it in seconds. Fire extinguishers had not been set out, and no safety drills had been conducted. The circus's own fire plan, a series of exits and trained staff, had failed completely. Several Ringling Brothers executives were charged with involuntary manslaughter. They were found guilty but later pardoned after agreeing to compensate the victims. The circus itself accepted responsibility and paid out nearly $4 million in damages, an enormous sum for the time. For 10 years, every dollar of profit went to the victims' families. But the lessons of Hartford reached far beyond the circus. Across the United States, new safety laws were introduced. Flame retardant materials became mandatory for public venues. Fire inspectors began checking tents, theatres and nightclubs with unprecedented rigour. The Hartford Circus Fire changed how America thought about safety and about human behaviour under crisis. For the survivors, the memories never faded. Donald Anderson, the boy with the knife, rarely spoke of what he'd done. "I just did what I had to," he once said. People were dying. There was no time to think. His quick action saved more than 300 lives. Others carried scars both visible and unseen. One child survivor later said, "Every time I smell smoke, I'm back there. The heat, the screams, the sound of the tent falling." The fire had taken just 10 minutes. 10 minutes to turn joy into horror, laughter into silence, and the greatest show on earth into a national nightmare. Today, the site of the fire is peaceful. A ring of trees marks where the Big Top once stood. In the centre, a plaque bears the name of the lost. Each year, families and descendants gather there in quiet remembrance. The circus itself would go on. It rebuilt, adopting new fireproof materials, new safety standards, and new hope. But the memory of Hartford never left the ring. Among circus performers, the date, July 6, 1944, became sacred, a reminder that spectacle and safety must always walk hand in hand. The Hartford Circus Fire remains one of the deadliest disasters in American history. Not because of malice, but because of complacency. A single spark, a simple oversight, a moment of confusion. Together they formed a perfect storm. It began as a day of wonder, a welcome reprieve from the fear of war. And in less than 10 minutes, it became a story of fire, chaos, courage, and loss that would echo for generations. The Hartford Circus Fire, when the greatest show on earth met its darkest hour. Obviously, this was a very, very disturbing story, and our condolences go out to the families of the people who lost their lives and their descendants. Despite that, I hope you liked the way the material was presented. I'll see you on the next one, and I'll say goodbye for now.